Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
Only 2 students? Are you both from construction field?
Oh, yes, I am from construction. Actually, I mean construction procurement side.
Where do you work?
I am working in the open unit itself.
Okay. Can I hear from?
Madam, I also from construction side.
Where do you work?
Actually, now I'm in the academic side. I was a quantity surveyor previously.
Sorry?
I was a quantity surveyor. Now I'm in the academic side.
In the sense, you are a teacher.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think my lecture is may not be required, right? You are Maheshi, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Why did you decide to complete this, or rather follow this master's course in procurement?
Because I'm a lecturer in quantity surveying in the Department of Quantity Surveying. So this procurement side is needed for my career.
Okay. So you both are lecturers, or what's the name of?
I am in the administration side. I am a senior
You are
assistant.
handling contracts within the university, right?
Yes, yes, yeah.
Okay. Right. I think I have done this before also. The process of procurement. Actually, process of procurement starts with the designing your requirement, and it ends after execution and after finishing the defect liability period. So whoever who is handling procurement should understand the entire process. May not be in depth. For example, if any procurement officer who doesn't have works experience, construction experience, not from the construction field, still he or she should be able to manage the procurement process, including contract administration. So that is the idea of having the procurement experts, starting from the beginning to the end. Even if when you are handling any procurement, even if you don't have experience in particular of that subject, you may be able to handle it. For example, if you are working for a, say, funded project, you will have to handle consultancy contracts as well. Sometimes you may have to hire an expert, not from the construction field, but maybe a financial expert. You may have to hire. You should be able to read the TOR and understand what are the requirements from procurement perspective. what are the missing areas from procurement perspective. So that is the idea of learning the procurement cycle so that it's easy for you to handle it if you have to procure something. And also a person who is having a master's means you should be able to handle any kind of procurement after completion and after joining a place, right? So contract is, I don't have to highlight, it's a agreement between two or more parties whereby each party promises to do or not to do anything. So in the contract, it will say these are the things to be done, these are the things to be not to be done, these are the obligations of one party, these are the obligations of the other party, and finally, if necessary, how to terminate a contract, and etc., and how to go for litigation. Everything should be included in a contract. Whether it is a construction works contracts or whether it's a goods purchase or consultancy or even any other document, these important information should be there. For example, in construction contract, a performance security is required. And it says contractor shall submit a performance security within 14 days of letter of acceptance. You can see the language. It says shall submit. When you are drafting or when you are modifying or when you have to write something, make sure that the correct language is used. Sometimes they write contractor is to be submit a performance security. Contractor may submit a performance security. That language is wrong. Even we don't write will. It says shall. Shall means it's a must. So the contractor is obliged to submit the performance security. And also the conditions of contract say no work shall be carried out on the site on locally recognized days of rest or outside the normal working hours. So what cannot be done will also written in the contract. So what I want to bring here is at which point the contract will be fulfilled. The offer is given by the bidder, not the invitation. The bid submitted by the bidder is the offer, and the letter of acceptance is the acceptance from the employer. So then only the contract will form. Okay. In construction contracts, there will be different types of contracts. What is the usual standard type that they use in Sri Lanka?
BOQ type contract.
What do you call it?
Unit rate.
Unit rate. Or we call admeasurement, or sometimes we call it remeasurement. The better word is admeasurement contract. Right? So that is the usual type of contract that we use in Sri Lanka. Then I'll go to the last one, the lump sum. What is lump sum contract?
That's a fixed amount for the design and build type contracts.
Right. Even otherwise, can't you use the lump sum contract? Do you
We can
want
use.
to, sorry?
We can use, but once the contractor complete the contract, we have to pay such amount.
No. What is the main requirement for a lump sum contract versus admission contract?
The itemized BOQ is there.
Price. Ma'am, fixed price.
BOQ type contract.
How many students join now? 5. Rather 4. Okay. Are there anyone who connects later? There are 5 in the system. Did anyone connect subsequently?
Just two joined after that. No matter.
Yeah, may I know whether they have construction background, because so that I can use that language and I don't have to go into detail in some of the things. That's why I want to know.
Ma'am, I joined just now, madam.
Yeah. What is your background? Are you from the construction field?
No, ma'am, no, ma'am. I am accountant, madam.
Okay.
I some BOQ measurement. I paid some construction.
Oh. Yeah, because I asked that question is some of the things when I am explaining, I don't have to go further. If all the participants are from construction field, if you can't understand or if you want any further clarifications, stop me and I may be able to explain further.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, thank you.
Okay. So, unit rate and lump sum contracts, we usually go for unit rate contract for works contracts. We prepare a BOQ. And what is the meaning of unit rate contract? What do you agree? How do you make the payment? How do you agree with the contractor upfront?
Based on the actual work done.
Based on the actual quantities, what is agreed upfront? At the rate agreed upfront. You agree the rate and based on the actual quantity, you make the payment. What is lump sum? You agree to pay a fixed amount.
Fixed price.
Fixed price, so many rupees. If the contractor finish this particular work, you will pay that fixed amount. It can be a total sum or it may have a breakup for several activities and then totaling to the final total. Now tell me, what is the difficulty of making the payment on lump sum? Why can't you agree on a lump sum upfront?
Difficult to change something.
Yeah. First of all, don't try to change something. Huh? I will talk about it later. The variations, right? Okay. If you expect variations, it's difficult. What else? Now, you measure the quantities in admeasurement contract, you measure the quantities. But in lump sum, you have to measure the quantities upfront, right? So can you measure the quantities upfront? Yes or no? Think about less complex, small value contracts. Like, for example, building construction. If you can quantify the work upfront, it is much easier to go for fixed price contract rather than admeasurement contract. I want to highlight it here because even for very small contracts where admeasurement is not required, the measuring is not required, subsequently we go for admeasurement contract. But if you can go for a lump sum contract, it is convenient for everybody. Contractor doesn't have to measure subsequently, the employer doesn't have to measure and prepare the bill accordingly. So if you have very small contracts, don't go for admeasurement contract, go for a lump sum contract. Because some of the work that we do, the hidden expenditure on that is huge. And you don't gain anything at the end of the day by doing that. For example, the government used to split the contracts to small contracts. The hidden cost of administering and managing the number of small contracts is huge and non-productive. So when you are deciding what is the type of contract that you are going to adopt is important. That is why I say even the procurement officer should have an idea of, even if you don't have construction experience, if your profession is different, that kind of understanding is required if you are handling procurement. You can't say that it's purely a construction issue. And also it's always a teamwork. The input from everybody is important, right? So decide on what is the most suitable type of contract, and also, of course, the method of procurement. So that is much important so that you can achieve your result quickly, right? So what is cost reimbursable? This is again maybe cumbersome for large value complex contracts. For small value contracts, if you can quantify the work that carried out by the contractor, how many bags of cement he used, how many cubic meters of sand, etc., and then the actual cost of those inputs will be reimbursed. Of course, you will pre-agree for a percentage markup for the services given by the contractor. So that is difficult to monitor, but sometimes for small value works, you may go for that. for example, I mean, in works contract itself, you have something called day works. So day works also, basically you reimburse the cost. Like for example, dewatering. When you are carrying out foundation, you may require to dewater. Dewatering will be measured. The number of hours will be measured, and based on the pre-agreed rate, that will be paid. You cannot quantify that upfront or even subsequently. So while doing, you will monitor and record how many hours used. Right?
Madam, in cost reimbursement, how the contract is receiving the payment, is that on monthly payment or
That can be agreed upfront, depending on your work. But there again, it's cumbersome. The employer has to monitor all the records and make the payment accordingly. And unit rate contracts or admission contract is the most common in the public sector for construction works, both large and small. Bidders are invited to quote rates for estimated quantities of different classes of work to be performed. So that is a BOQ given by the employer. It will have the estimated quantities. The bid price comprises the summation of estimated quantities multiplied by the respective unit rate for all the items of work. During the contract execution, quantities of work completed satisfactorily are measured as a basis of payment. So that is how it is paid. I mean, it's nothing to explain, but this is how it is written, right? So you measure the quantities for the work done satisfactorily, in the sense acceptable, and then that will be paid to the contractor. So it is the contractor's responsibility to carry out the work in accordance with the specifications given. The cost reimbursable is measurable inputs such as labor, material, equipment, spare parts, insurance, tools, or fuel, or whatever, together with the fee to cover his associated cost, associated overheads, management, and the profit. So this fee will be agreed upfront, and based on the actual inputs, the cost of those inputs will be reimbursed. The fee can be a lump sum agreed upfront, or it can be a percentage of the cost of inputs. Or it can be an incentive type contract payment, which increases if savings of materials in an agreed estimated payments, or which reduces with cost overruns. If the contractor saves on the material cost or the input cost, the contractor will be given an incentive, and if there's a cost overrun, then there will be a cost reduction. Lump sum contract, I explained. normally used for small, short duration, well-defined, and detailed civil works or building construction, which are not subject to large quantity variations or conditions of high risk. If there is a high risk of carrying out that work, like irrigation works, and also expect some quantity variations, then you cannot use lump sum contract. But even for very small building constructions, the small houses, you may go for lump sum contract instead admeasurement contract, where the substructure, the foundations, the soil conditions are good. And also, lump sum contracts will be used for erect and installation, design and build. That is, we use the word erection and installation, like for example, steel structures. We don't say design and build. Design and build contracts means the contractor himself will design the that infrastructure, mostly the buildings. Then turnkey. What is turnkey? Is it same as design and build, or is it different? That is turnkey contract. In admeasurement contracts, the one we usually use, the contract will be signed between employer and the contractor. And there's another party called engineer who will monitor and supervise the work carried out by the contractor. So basically, contractor works under the supervision of the employer. Even in design and build contract, the employer will monitor the work, because employer has the capacity to do that. Either employer or employer will hire a third party. But in turnkey, it's employer will request a party to do the construction, design, do the construction, and even supervision will not be carried out by the employer. And finally, the employer will have to turn the key. So entire responsibility is given to a third party. So that is turnkey. So in these methods, the risk is less in the contractor's risk is less in admeasurement contracts. And the BOQ and the drawings are defined. So therefore, the cost of constructing under that method is lesser than the other methods. If it is a design and build, the contractor's risk is more, because design is not done. He has to do the design and get it cleared and then do the construction. And he agreed on a lump sum basis to get the payment. So therefore, the risk is high. When the risk is high, the contractors always add an additional markup for the risk. So therefore, the cost of construction goes up. Though it is convenient, the cost of construction will be more. Similarly, the turnkey, the employer doesn't have any burden of executing that work, but the risk of the turnkey executor will add to the bid price, and therefore it will be expensive. The cost will be high. So that is why it is economical to go for admeasurement contract or unit rate contract than going for other methods. But design and build may be convenient because you can commence the work quickly. So therefore, it's geared to go for design and build contract. In design and build contract, remember, how do you make the payment? That is the method of payment for design and build contract.
Milestone payment which we agreed initially with the contractor.
Okay. Do you pay on your actual quantities for design and build?
No.
Not at all?
Usually for the progress of a building, like 50% program like that.
Finally, not on measure quantities?
But then, yeah.
Huh? Final payment based on what?
Based on the completion, that means fully completed.
Not on the actual quantities, is it?
Yes, usually.
Okay. But I heard was otherwise. Anyone from CCB? No. Open University, you have contracts with CCB, right?
No, madam. Actually, one contract we have with the KSK Construction, not with the CCB at the moment. No CCB contract.
Even before?
My period is very short, around 3-4 years now. So up to during my period, there is no contract with the CCB.
Okay. I wanted to highlight here is that because I heard that those contracts finally go by the admeasurements, which is not acceptable, right? Because the concept of design and build is not that. Then private investment. I'll explain that later. When the government doesn't have finances for infrastructure, governments can get the help of private sector to build the infrastructure. So that is private investment. I'll go into details later. And the design and build contracts usually used for bridges, buildings, and other infrastructure. And what is important here is by going for design and build, you may get innovative designs from the contractor. So your document should focus to obtain innovative designs if you are going for a design and build contract rather than typical type design. To get a innovative design is the idea. So that is why you go for design and build. So different bidders will have different ideas. So so that you can decide on the best way of doing it. Okay. Public-private partnership. This is what we talked earlier, right? Private investment. Why public-private partnership? I said when the government doesn't have sufficient funds from the treasury to build required infrastructure, the government can collaborate with the private enterprises, often on large infrastructure projects that the private partner may finance, plan, or execute. So, private party will execute the project, right? They will build it and they will execute the project. What are the public-private partnerships? Partnership involve collaboration between government agency and a private sector company that can be used to finance, build, and operate projects. So the private sector company will fund the project in the sense he will bear the cost of construction and operate the project, such as public transportation networks, parks, and convention centers, etc. By financing a project through public-private partnership can allow a project to be completed sooner, so that he will finance and complete the project quickly. And what is the, from the government side, they will expect often involve concessions of taxes or other operating revenue, protection from liabilities, whatever the liabilities, how to handle, or partial ownership rights over nominally public services and property to private sector. But ownership rights, maybe the land will be given by the government so that the private party can build it and operate it by themselves. Public-private partnerships, the important thing is it allows large-scale government projects such as roads, bridges, hospitals to be completed with private funding. Rather than spending from the treasury, it will be constructed by using private funds. These partnerships work well when private sector technology and innovation combined with incentives to complete work on time. So you have to carefully look at it, how to get the private sector technology. Of course, the government may have to give some kind of incentives to the private sector developer. Risks for private enterprise include cost overruns, technical defects, inability to meet quality standards. So those are the issues that they may face. So the public partner or the government will face to a problem. Usage fees may not be supported by demand. Now, what the public-private partnership means, for example, if it is a road, will be constructed by private sector and operate by the private sector. So the private sector developer will collect the toll. So that toll fee, that collection may not be sufficient because if the demand is less, or the fee cannot be increased. It may not be, if you increase the number of users will be reduced. So with all that, that will be an issue. And also, despite the advantages, it will be an advantage to a country and the government to allow the private sector to carry out that business, but those partnerships are often criticized for blurring the lines between legitimate public purposes and for profit activity, and for perceived exploitation of the public due to corrupt practices that may occur. So that is the problem, that because this agreement should be drafted very clearly, but it will be an advantage, but the chances of exploitation by the public may occur, because sometimes there may be malpractices during the process. So that is what you have to focus if you are going for a public-private partnership. And how does it work? A government might be heavily indebted and unable to undertake a capital-intensive building project. However, a private enterprise might be interested in funding its construction in exchange for receiving the operating profit. When the government doesn't have money, the private party will do it for the government, of course, at a profit. And what is important, public-private partnership typically have contract periods of 20 to 30 years or longer. Why it is necessary for a longer period? If you are an investor, it will not be economical to go for a shorter period contract. That is why these PPP type contracts are of longer period. When it is longer period, the developer can get his money back reasonably, so that they will invest on those projects. If it is for a shorter period, the investor will not be interested of financing those projects. That is why longer periods are necessary. So depending on the project, of course. So that is why most of the PPP contracts, it's for longer period. Sometimes it may be for 99 years even. What is important is drafting the contract very clearly, and also drafting including the requirements which may happen in future, so that you have in the contract how to handle future issues as well. So private party will design, complete, and implement the project, implement and fund the project. The public partner or the government focus on defining and monitoring compliance with the objective of that particular project. Risks are distributed between the public-private partners through a process of negotiation. This is what is much important. The risk of carrying out this work, the risk of the contractor or the private party, as well as the risk of the government, has to be identified, and through negotiations, how to mitigate, the mitigation measures should be included in the contract. That is the most important part. So you heard these words BOT, BOOT, BOO. So BOT means the private party will build, operate, and transfer to the government end of the day. And BOO means build, operate, and own. If that particular project, once that lifetime is over, taking back to the government may not be economical, because there's no value at the end of the day. So in such a situation, the government doesn't have to get it back. But if it is a road, of course, government has to take it back. So those projects, it's purely the private party will build and operate. And sometimes build, own, operate, build, operate, and own. The BOO means it will be the private sector project, but sometimes they will own it during operations and then transfer back to the government, that is BOO. So there are so many ways of doing it, sometimes modernizing an existing factory. Say, for example, KK cement factory or Parantan chemical factory. It has to be modernized and then operate, and then they can transfer at the end of the day. Okay. So in our country, is there any project of this nature? The private sector investment and transferring back to the government? Any single project in Sri Lanka? No idea. So what is the usual term that we hear in Sri Lanka? What is the way of what is the mechanism of constructing Katanayak Expressway? Does anyone know? You are doing procurement, you have to learn all that.
Direct cabinet approval without calling the bids.
Yeah. Bids were not invited. What else? Who finance?
Government of China.
Who brought the financing? Did the government obtain loan from China, or the builder himself proposes the financing?
Builder himself get finance.
Okay. Right. Now, what is the mechanism for obtaining funds from multilateral institutions like World Bank and ADB? Anyone knows? Anyone who worked for funded projects? No. Okay. Both and World Bank and ADB, those institutions, in fact, the Sri Lankan government itself is a member of the World Bank. So, World Bank consists of almost all the countries in the world, except North Korea. I think it's only North Korea right now, right? So, the government, basically, those member countries can draw money from the World Bank, right? So, the procedure is when the government has a project, the government will request from the bank to fund that project. Then, of course, the World Bank will assess that project, the viability of that project, and then agree to fund that particular project. It will be funded in tranches depending on the progress of the project. The funds will not give upfront, the entire amount will not be given upfront to the government. There will be an advance and then it will be replenished with the progress of the project. So that is the mechanism adopted by the Asian Development Bank as well, right? When it, so then, and also, of course, the interest rates are relatively low, not the 100% market rates, and the payback periods also are relatively low. That is the advantage of obtaining funds from multilateral agencies. Right? And what is unsolicited proposal? Unsolicited means, the meaning of unsolicited also, a third party himself, he thinks this project is suitable for this government and he brings that proposal to the government. It is not on an invitation. The bidding process, we always invite for bids, right? Unsolicited means without an invitation, the third party themselves decide to submit a proposal, right? For a new or innovative idea submitted to a government on the initiative of the offerer, he himself, the person who offers, for the purpose of obtaining a contract with the government, and that is not in response to a government-initiated solicitation. Without inviting, submit a proposal. So there are no other proposals to compare or whatever. There's only a single proposal submitted by themselves. Then it is a responsibility of the government for reviewing unsolicited proposals. So that itself has to be studied and look at the advantages, disadvantages, the risks, and see whether it is viable to sign a contract with that party. So that is the unsolicited proposals. And sometimes, and even there was a small guideline prepared by the Treasury, it says once unsolicited proposal is received, based on that, invite proposals from the other parties, which has, I mean, from transparency side and from the government side, it may be good. But if I give a proposal to the government, and based on that, if they invite bids and my chances of winning is less, I will not participate, or I will not submit proposals subsequently, right? So there are pros and cons of this transparency and things like those. So you have to look at carefully and then select what is the best way of doing it. So unsolicited proposal is submitted by themselves. And in Sri Lanka, we received many, we had several construction projects based on unsolicited proposals, and they brought the financier. Now, what I explained earlier under public-private partnership, they do finance by themselves, and the risk of that cost is with them. And they will collect that with, I mean, not immediately, but subsequently from selling their product. But here in Sri Lanka, most of these projects, what happened is they bought the financier by themselves, but subsequently that burden of paying that loan is taken over by the government. That contractor who brought the unsolicited proposal did the construction. He was paid by the financier, and he is okay, but that payment, that amount has to be paid by the government. Basically, is a loan to the government. That is how it works. So the responsibility of paying back is totally with the government, not the financier, not the person who built the project. So that is how it works in Sri Lanka. So and also, what is the other private partnership in Sri Lanka? For example, telecom, what is the mechanism? What is the government input? For the Hambantota port, what is the mechanism? Okay. How it is done is some percentage of shares is retained with the government. There was a recent discussion on papers, right, regarding telecom Vikunan Nepa and all that. Don't you watch news? What does that mean? The majority of the shares are retained with the government, and the balance is sold to a private party. And the Hambantota port, the port, what is called that? What do you call it? The port establishment, the main thing, is given to one contract, and these other utility providing of sweeping and maintaining this building and etc. is given to another contract. The main contract is with the higher percentage to the private party. The other contract, which is the easier part, that contract, the majority of the shares retained with the government. Okay. Now you have to analyze what is economical and what is better. Think you as the service provider first, rather than thinking as a government. We think we should not give anything to the third party, and we try to retain everything. Then it won't work. First, we have to think from the third party. If I am given lesser shares in a company, what is my role in the company? In a company, a company will be managed by the majority shareholder. Therefore, I will not be interested of giving my shares into that company. And if you want to attract a better group to manage the company, especially you have to issue majority shares to that group. Then only they will have authority to manage the company. And also, if it is lesser shares, your authority will not be there. But in these agreements, the authority is given to the other foreign companies to manage the particular institution, because if it is with the government, the management capacity is poor. So that was a problem, right? Most of these institutions, the problem was the managing. So it was given to a third party with lesser shares, but then management is given to those firms. Then again, think from them. If you are with the smaller shares, and if you manage it properly, and if you make profit, the profit will be shared based on the number of shares that you have. So you are getting only a small amount out of the profit that you made by using your capacity. So therefore, third party will not be interested of having a smaller, lesser number of shares. On the other hand, if the government has more shares in that company, and if that company goes to liquidity, government will have to bear that loss more than the private part. So therefore, if you are going for a private, private company, like telecom, etc., you have to be very careful what would be the most economical way to the government as well as the service provider. It should be a win-win situation for both parties, which is difficult. Okay. Any questions? Any questions? Are you there?
Yes, madam. Yes, we are here.
Any questions?
No, ma'am.
Okay. If you are handling works contracts, if you are procuring works contracts, you have to have good understanding on conditions of contracts that you adapt. Unlike purchasing of something, in works contracts, by carrying out a process of procurement, at the end of the day, you will select a contractor. You will select a contractor to build whatever you want. So you select a person and now you are going to get the work done through him through a longer period. So therefore, the risk of getting that job from that person is more. Unlike if you buy something, they just supply, you check whether it is in the correct quality and then you accept. But here you select the contractor and you engage him for a period to finish your work. So therefore, it is written in the conditions of contract how to carry out this work, how to mitigate the risks of doing it. All that is written in conditions of contract. That is why even for, if you are buying something, you just obtain a bid and then you issue a purchase order. But even for a small value contract, for works contract, you sign a contract with required conditions because the risk is more. How to behave during that period of the employer as well as the contractor is written. So that is very much important. So that is the worldwide practice. So usually we follow the conditions of contract. So what is the conditions of contract that you follow in Sri Lanka? What is the document that you use?
It's a CEDA document.
CEDA one. Other than that, what are the available in the world, the standard documents?
PDIC document is there.
Yeah. Any other? There's a QS, right? Is she there? And there are documents developed by Institute of Civil Engineers of the UK, and also there's a SIPS, Institute of Procurement or something. So various institutions develop these documents, but widely and commonly used document is FIDIC. And also the funding agencies like World Bank, ADB, they do have their own documents. Of course, for large value contracts, they do use FIDIC contract with some additional modifications to suit their requirements. And these documents are for admeasurement contracts. I will go fast. In any contract, there are words which are defined. Those words starts with capital. Unlike the normal English, you don't start any, you don't use any capital letter in between the paragraphs. But here you do see in a contract, you have the word starting with capital. That means that word is defined. The meaning of that word is as defined in this contract. For example, the word engineer is defined. Is the person named in the contract data or any other competent person appointed by the employer who is responsible for administering supervision of the execution of the work. That person may be an engineer or architect or whoever it is, not necessarily to be a professional engineer. It can be anybody. You can see the engineer is defined starting with capital E, and here the word engineer is used without capital E. That means the English meaning of the engineer is, if you start with simple. So when you are handling any contract, make sure when you are writing letters to use the correct capital or simple letter correctly, so that the meaning will be a question, and it might lead to litigation at the end of the day. So therefore, it is important to use the correctly write when you are using defined words. I will not go each and every one. For example, the cost. The word cost is, we usually use that word. We say the cost of sugar, right? Now here it says cost means all expenditure reasonably incurred by the contractor, whether on or off the site, including overhead and similar charges, but does not include profit. So if you write capital C, that means it doesn't include profit. If you write simply the C, it can lead to an argument whether it includes profit or not. So therefore, use correctly, not to lead to ambiguity subsequently. The contractor's equipment means all machinery, vehicles, etc. brought to the site for execution of the work. So any vehicle, any generator, concrete plant, everything comes as an equipment. Then what is plant? Plant means any machinery forming a part of the permanent works. So it can be the same generator which is fixed to the building, which is a requirement of the BOQ. It will call plant. the generator the contractor brings to the site for his own purposes will be called equipment. So that is how it is defined. So understand the importance of defined word in a contract, not only for works contract, any contract. And you all know the contract has several sections, and what is the priority order is defined in a contract. I think this one I did, right? Did I? Okay.
Madam, are you sharing something? Actually, we cannot see anything on
You
the
can't
screen.
see?
Yeah.
Sorry. Can you see now? Can you see?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay. The works contract is signed between employer and the contractor. And contractor can engage subcontractors, of course, with the consent of the employer. And also, there can be another group called nominated subcontractor. Who is nominated subcontractor? Subcontractor usually selected by the contractor, but for some special work, the employer have the right to select a contractor and ask the main contractor to get use that contract, that subcontractor for that particular work. It's like a forced marriage. And by doing that, the contractor's responsibilities of delivering the work will not change. So the main contractor, for his work, he can engage subcontractors as his choice, as well as some of the activities, the subcontractor will be selected by the employer. But at the end of the day, the entire responsibility, he can't say that because the subcontractor is selected by the employer, he is not relieved from his responsibility. And there's another party is defined in the contract called engineer. And engineer is not a party to the works contract, in a works contract. It's not a party to the contract. But his role and his duty is defined in a works contract. And usually employer is selected by the, engineer is selected by the employer. The engineer may exercise the authority attributable to the engineer as specified in or necessarily to be implied from the contract. If the engineer is required to obtain the approval of the employer before exercising a specified authority, the requirement shall be as stated in the contract data. The employer undertakes not to impose further constraints on the engineer's authority except as agreed with the contract. So in the contract, engineer's role is defined. And if engineer requires any approvals from the employer before exercising that particular activity, then it should be stated in the contract. For example, variations, changes, cost variation. Employer can say if the cost varied more than 10%, engineer requires employer's approval prior to issuing the variation order. Right? If otherwise, employer cannot control engineer's work. Employer doesn't have authority to interfere with the engineer's work. So that is, again, very much important. However, whenever the engineer exercises specified authority for which the employer's approval is required, then the employer shall be deemed to have given approval. So employer should look into and give the approval. Now earlier, the role of the engineer was expected to be impartial. When he takes decisions, he was supposed to be impartial. But I said engineer was employed by the employer. So therefore, this impartiality is a question. He cannot, because he is employed by the employer. But today, the conditions of contracts, that role is removed. He is no more impartial and introduce adjudicator to the conditions of contract. So there's another party called adjudicator is there for that impartial role. So if there's any dispute, before going for arbitration, it can be referred to the adjudicator. So that is how this adjudicator was introduced in conditions of contract. And also what is important is that we talk about FIDIC conditions of contract, then funding agency conditions of contract and ICTAD conditions of contract. And also ICTAD has different documents for depending on the value of the contract. What is important is now the engineer's duties and authorities are defined, and you should be able to read it carefully and understand, because these documents may be slightly different the way it is written. Not only this clause, all the clauses. So read very carefully and use that particular document which you use for your contract and take decisions. Not from the experience that you had before. Suppose you used ICTAD SBD2 for a particular contract and you have taken some decisions based on that, and now you are working for a funded project and you are using a different conditions of contract. The way it is written in that particular contract may be different. Maybe it is defined better, right? So therefore, use the document which is used for your contract. That is important. But what I am reading here may be slightly different in other conditions of contracts. So that is why I say use that particular conditions of contract. Any questions? Okay. Engineer's duties and authority. It says the employer shall appoint the engineer. In FIDIC, it says engineer should be a natural person. What does that mean? Engineer cannot be a company. You have to name a person in accordance with FIDIC, but it is not defined in FIDIC ICTAD contracts in that way. Engineer staff shall include suitably qualified engineers and other professionals who are competent to carry out these duties, of course. The engineer shall have no authority to amend the contract. That is, the contract is signed between the employer and the contractor, and engineer cannot change, amend, or alter the contract. The engineer has to take decisions in accordance with the contract signed between employer and the contractor. The engineer may exercise the authority attributable to the engineer as specified in or necessarily to be implied from the contract. If the engineer is required to obtain the approval of the employer before exercising the authority, the requirement shall be as stated in the contract deed. The employer undertakes not to impose further constraints on the engineer's authority except as agreed with the contract. Then, of course, the engineer can delegate his authority to a representative in writing and inform the contractor as well. Because contractor should know that authority is delegated to another person, right? In the contract, any instruction to the contractor should be given by the engineer in writing. If any change or anything has happened, has done, it should be communicated by the engineer to the contractor. Otherwise, the contractor is not entitled for that change, the cost of that change. Because in government sector, sometimes some other officials, the senior officials, go to site and ask the contractor to do additional things. But the engineer should issue the correct order to the contractor, then only the payments can be made to the contractor. Engineer's impartiality, I talk about it. I'll do quickly. Similarly, the contractor also has his obligations. The contractor shall design, execute, complete the works in accordance with the contract and with the engineer's instructions, and shall remedy any defects in the works. Here it says design as well. The design means the extent specified in the contract. The very small activities, sometimes the contractor may have to design. The contractor shall, whenever required by the engineer, submit details of the arrangements and methods which the contractor proposes to adopt execution of the works. No significant alterations can be made by the contract, right? Of course, the performance security has to be submitted. That's there again. In this document, the employer shall return the performance security within 21 days after receiving a copy of the performance certificate. The performance certificate means after defect liability. Some contracts it says after completion of the work. So that is why I said it may be different from one contract to another. So that kind of minor things. So that is important to look at. And here it says, if the contract price varies more than 25% of the initial price, the performance security has to be increased, right? But in the contract, this is in ICTAD contract, but it doesn't talk about decrease. It talks only about increase. If it increases, performance security has to be increased. I am wondering whether it is done. With the performance security increase, if the work goes up, cost goes up. Subcontractors I talk about. Program. The contract, once the contract is awarded, both parties should prepare a program reflecting how to carry out the work. What are the things to be done? What are the activities? And what is the duration requires? And we have to prepare a program. Unlike those days, today, you have computer packages to prepare a program. So, it is important to have a proper work program or construction program so that the engineer can monitor that the work is done in a proper manner and can whether it will be completed as agreed. So one of the problems in Sri Lanka is majority of the contracts doesn't complete on as agreed. For that, it is important to prepare a proper program and do the monitoring from the day one, so that you may be able to achieve this requirement. So I just want to highlight here because the majority of the construction contracts in Sri Lanka doesn't complete on time. And of course, there is a provision in the contract to give a time extension, because unlike goods contract or even a consultancy, there can be unforeseen things happening once the contract is started. That is why variation, provision of ordering variations is given. Once you do the excavation, you may require to issue a variation order. What is important is that variation can be done within the scope of the work. But sometimes what is noticed that variation orders are issued for convenience. If you have a project in Kurunagala, variation order is issued to access road to the head office in Colombo. There are such variation orders also noticed in Sri Lanka. But variation provision in a contract is given because when executing the work, whatever not noticed at the time of designing is required after during construction. For that, the procedure of issuing variation order and arising out of that, the requirement of more time for completion, the time extension provision is given in a contract. But that shouldn't be abused when carrying out a works contract. And what is important is the time extension, if required by the contractor due to unforeseen activity or unforeseen event, the contractor should request the engineer that more time is required to complete the contract. An engineer also should assess it and approve it, so that both parties can reschedule the contract to complete the contract on time, right? What is liquidated damages? What is liquidated damages?
So for the late payment from contractor, that means if the contractor doesn't complete within the time period, we can charge.
Right. Do it. How many contracts you charged liquidated damages?
My experience, ma'am, I charge around 10, 15. Not much, but the amount around 3-4% of the contract sum.
Okay. If the contractor cannot complete the work on time, kind of a amount can be charged from the contractor, the damages can be charged from the contractor for the delay, right? So that if that contract is further delayed and it has a maximum limit, so once the maximum limit is reached and if the contractor doesn't complete the work, you can terminate the contract. Pointless keeping that contract further. So liquidated damages has to be paid by the contract for not completing on the time. So that is why I said it is important to monitor the progress from the day one so that spillover may not happen. And sometimes contractors himself may delay the work and he may be ready to pay the LD to the employer because it may be cheaper than crashing the activity. Because any construction work has an optimum time period. If you delay the contract, the cost will go up. If you shorten the period also, cost will go up. If you want to do it quickly, you need extra inputs. Then you need more money. If you delay the contract, your equipment may idle. That also a cost. So it is economical to carry out the work at the correct time period, within the correct time period. So that is the program, right? And also it is important to have the program with showing the critical paths. I will not go into details of the what is critical path and etc. Basically, the activities which has to be complete to start the other work, and if that activity delays, the entire program will delay. There can be some other activities you can do parallelly. So the time extension will be given only if the critical path activities are affected due to the change or rain or whatever. Otherwise, it may not be required. Method of measurement. What is method of measurement? QS. Can you explain? Is she there? No. No, she isn't there, right? The way that the work carry out is measured. How do you measure? Where it is written. That is very much important. For building construction, Sri Lanka has standard method of measurements, SLS 573, if I remember correct, approved by the Sri Lanka standards. There it is written how to measure. We can't just take the tape and measure. Right? For example, concrete slab, if there is an opening, whether you deduct that square area or whether you measure it ignoring that opening, is specified in the standard method of measurement. It says if it is more than a certain square area, it will be deducted. If not, if it is smaller one, it will not be deducted. It will measure as there's no opening, right? Likewise, the way it is measured is mentioned in the method of measurement. And that is for buildings. For civil works, Sri Lanka doesn't have standard method of measurement. But the water board use the method of measurements published by UK. But unfortunately, RDA doesn't have standard method of measurements. Right? Right to vary. I will not go into detail, but as I said, there is a provision to make the variation, but where it is necessary. And the procedure of doing it is also given in the contract. What is provisional sum?
amount kept in the BOQs to do some specific works.
Okay. Some amount will be reserved in the contract itself by the employer, and that amount will be used for that particular item. Maybe it was not designed at the time of inviting bids, etc. So you have to make sure that provisional sums in a contract shouldn't be too large also, because having a provisional sum means there is no competition for that particular item. How do you agree on a rate subsequently for that? Depending on the work, if there is a similar rate in the other items, that can be used. So similar as to a variation, a rate will be, the price will be decided. And if it is more than the provisional sum amount, still that has to be paid by the employer, even if it exceeds by the amount reserved for that activity. If it is less, that need not to be paid. Day works. Day works, as I explained, any specific item to be done which cannot be quantified upfront, it will be done on actuals. My example of dewatering, right? Or even a small activity, critical activity. It will be carried out, and whatever the inputs, the labor charges, the number of hours worked, everything will be counted and then will be paid based on the rates given in the contract. In the contract, there will be a different schedule for day works. That day work schedule is for the work carried out on day work basis. So in a contract, the bidder will give a high price for that because it will not include any other cost. It will incorporate all his costs into that day work rate. So day work rate is usually high. And to avoid bidding very high, it may be considered for evaluation by giving a nominal quantity. So the problem is what is done as a practice, that list will have almost all the items like cement, sand, everything is there. And then you may consider that for evaluation as well. But actually, what are the things that you really do on day work basis at a site? That is the question. Whether you really carry out day works at a site. If not, by having that, it will distort your bidding pattern. Because if you consider that for evaluation, which is totally unused, will not give the real competition of the other works in a contract. So don't just include day work schedule, and also with your experience include only the necessary items in the day work schedule. And day work schedule rate is not the rate for decide for on variation. That is why you use that rate for some other purpose, which is a high rate than usual. in works contracts, as I said, it takes longer period to do the construction. During that period, the prices of material can go up. And to compensate that price change, employer will agree to take that risk by the employer. That is what is said in price adjustment. The employer is ready to pay extra for the cost variation of the material, labor in a contract. And how it is done is given in the contract. And in Sri Lanka, a formula is defined in ICTAD contracts, and the procedure is given in the conditions of contract. How to pay additionally to the contractor based on the price variations of the inputs, the material, labor, plant, etc. So, why it is done? So that contractor, when preparing his bid, need not to be worried that the price change in future will be looked after by the employer. That is why it is said for shorter period contracts, the contractor will bear that, in the sense contractor will have to consider that when pricing. So if price adjustment is not paid, the contractor will incorporate a certain percentage in his contract for that risk. If not, the contractor doesn't have to incorporate that because he will be paid additionally so that his bid can be competitive. And remember, this price adjustment payment is not the reimbursement, not the exact amount reimbursed. It is a compensation given to the contractor. If the contractor knows this procedure is not, still there is a risk, he will add the additional markup. A good contractor will add additional markup. So remember, it's not a reimbursement. Other thing is, earlier, we used to pay, the government used to pay based on actual cost changes. For example, the cement price change. If the cement price has gone up, it is a tedious exercise to calculate how many cement bags used in that particular period. That has to be calculated from the bill, contractor's bill. And whether price has gone up, where it is shown. Good old days, we had only one source of cement, only the cement corporation. So if the cement corporation price goes up, it's a standard price, knows everybody. So that amount will be reimbursed. And also the contract has to show that contractor purchased that during that period. So he has to produce the invoice. And also to show that he didn't have cement purchased before. So that's how earlier it was paid. So you can understand how much the contractor is given for the cost change. Can you do that for all the material? No. And today's contract, the price change also is cannot be decided, because there are so many types of cement and the prices are different, price varies differently. So it's a question, right? And earlier, because of that, the amount reimbursed is, or rather amount get additionally was very little due to price change. But today, according to this equation, rather formula, the contractor is compensated much, much, much better than the earlier system. And further, the formula used by FIDIC may also not be compensate this much of money to the contractor, because that again a simple formula which will not compensate the as in the ICTAD formula. So that is the advantage of using ICTAD formula. The risk of the contractor is much less. This is the FIDIC formula. It says a fixed sum plus percentage into ln over LO. L means the labor price divided by the previous price. So whatever the increase, A plus B plus C plus D is 1. So that is how it is given. So there is no comprehensive way of comprehensive formula like ICTAD formula. The contractor's claim, the contract, if there is an additional payment required, the contractor can claim. If there is any change, contractor has a claim. Contractor has a price claim as well as time extension. Either price change only, either time extension only, or both. Right? What is important is contractor has to bring that to the notice of the engineer. This says within 28 days after contractor became aware. So that is, those clauses read very carefully and try to improve the way of managing these contracts, right? I am highlighting these because my experience is that the contract administration in Sri Lanka is very poor. We call it the employer and the engineer administer the contract, not managing the contract. It's you administer the contract. You can see the difference between the two words, right? So that has to be improved. Because if the contractor didn't request for it, it's deemed to understand that he doesn't need it. So he can later, at the end of the day, after completing the work, can't come and say that time extension is required. So that is the importance. The variation and the time extension has to be attended while construction is going on. Yeah, you can ask if you have any question quickly. It's 17. Any question?
No, ma'am, no.
So shall we stop there?
Okay, ma'am.
Okay.